Yeah, so I'm just recording thoughts on a morning walk with the shadow dog. But it's around the idea of what is an argument when we argue with other people, and what is an argument when it's just our own thoughts at the back of our minds, what we call self-criticism. Where really there's an argument going on and a dilemma inside in our own mind, which is generally always about the past, and the interpretation of the past and all the complexities of the other people involved in whatever it is where criticism might apply and need to be defended in the mind, to looked at from a different perspective. I've got 5 planets in Libra, so it's natural for me to strive to try to see things from other people's perspectives, or at least from different angles. And it's very debilitating in a way, because it takes an awful lot of thought before an action. Whereas all other types of people can just take action very swiftly, without necessarily analysing everything from every side. But in arguments in the past, where I haven't looked at everything from every side, and just been triggered, whether happily or unhappily, into having to express my view with somebody who has a different view, and have a back and forth going on, essentially where one isn't accepting the other person's point of view, or in an argument that gets heated where neither side is able to see the other side, all they can see is the disagreement. So over the years, especially the last few years, what I've realised is that we're all like cinema projections. We're really only seeing what we're projecting onto reality. We don't quite see reality itself. And so when one is in an argument, it's projecting my biased view that I was born with, that's written all over my birth chart. The view I've been defending my whole life. The view that I'm trying to see clearly, my own view. And when it runs into conflict with someone else's view, well, that's a major argument and a fight. And the art of peace is to be able to see that the other person's point of view is valid to them. And law exists to see, well, whose view is more valid and closest to the truth. But the biggest admission is that none of our own personal views are the truth. And the next biggest admission is that I think my view is the truth, or closest to the truth. And I inherently believe that my view is closer to the truth than other people's, and that they're overpowering me by making me follow their truth, or their law, or their judgment. And all of these thoughts are formed in the mind and burnt into neural pathways in our brains when we're little toddlers. It's all there waiting to unfold, but as we're little toddlers, we really begin, all of us, to experience what it is to be disempowered by someone else. So there was the power of being pushed around in the pram and throwing the rattle out of the pram so that somebody bigger than you would pick it up and give it to you. And it would make you laugh and giggle, and you'd throw the rattle out of the pram again, and somebody would pick it up and bring it back to you. It was like the outside world was your dog, and all you had to do was throw the ball or the stick, and the dog would bring it back to you, and you'd be like, yay, that's great. But as soon as we start crawling towards dangers. And those grown-ups who bring back the rattle to the pram They're also keeping an eye out that you don't crawl over a cliff or crawl into a fire or crawl into a lake or a river. And by the time you're walking, those dangers get even bigger because you can rove around and get into all kinds of dangers. And by the time you're a little toddler who's learning how to run, your adult's got to keep an eye on you, or at least be nearby, because you run so fast that you fall over or you hit into something or somebody else. And then there's big tears. And the grown-up has to come over and have some empathy and give you soothing energy. So that you get through the emotional sobs of the emotions flooding your eyes with tears. But the disempowerment part is where, as a baby becoming a toddler, you get picked up from behind, arms underneath your armpits, hands beneath your armpits, pulling you up off the ground. Maybe to save you from something, maybe just to bring you on your way, maybe because you're sitting there having a sulk over something. But there's nothing a baby can do about being lifted up and carried away. Their protests don't work. So that feeling of being lifted up and taken from what you were focused on by some greater power than you, who's bigger than you, it's inside in all of us. When we start to get in danger is when we get confronted by someone else saying, I have a fear that you're in danger, I must stop you from what you're going to do. It's the precautionary principle, and it's also everything the law is about. Anyway, the whole thing that I'm really saying here is that the argument is going on in my own mind, and in this last year I've really been realizing how much I had spent all my time in my mind, not really even truly realizing that one could disengage from focused in the mind, chasing thoughts around, and spend time actually feeling into the body. It's not as if I was never feeling before, but just to realize about disengaging from the mind, which is, in my view, disengaging from the masculine, from the outer, from the active. So it's been a very strange year for me of being very receptive all this year and allowing and letting things happen rather than fighting to control the destiny of what will happen. And so my inner me is very docile, which I think is like an animal word to do with animals and stuff. To be docile, but to be receptive, to allow. So in some ways I feel like if there's a soul level angel part of myself who's the more grown up part of me, and I'm still like the toddler, even though I'm 50 years old now. But the immortal soul part of me is like an archangel compared to my body limited self, mind, knowledge, me. And I'm learning how to not charge off ahead with my mind, thinking that I'm going to fix everything by fixating on everything I think needs fixing. With the idea that my partial self only has partial knowledge. My whole soul self, or feminine aspect of field of self, has access to all knowledge in time and space, rather than just the little path I think I'm on. So I'm learning to come to peace with the argument in my own mind, which is largely self-flagellation, self-criticisms. Saturn in Cancer in the 7th house, square exact to Sun Pluto kind of thing. Hey, Shadow. So allowing oneself to be guided by soul, and to allow the introspection time for the past to fall away, and yet the identity of one's nature in one's own birth chart to remain without the heavy conditioning of the world's teachings, where the world is teaching that it's a loveless world of part against part against part. There's something about having to let go of the partial identity in order to receive information from the whole identity, in order to not see oneself as separate with a tiny ration of love to survive on, and where everybody's fighting over their partial rations, and everyone's comparing in the separated mind the inner against the outer. So anyway, to some degree, all I'm trying to say here is I realise that the argument in the mind is actually an argument between the two hemispheres of the brain, you could say, but it's between the male and female, between should I push ahead or hold back, between, I don't mean to say that females hold back. And this isn't to say that the feminine form is the female, necessarily, in this sense. I'm just trying to say energies rather than form. And there I'm just trying to say that male and female energies are in both male and female forms. Inside of every human heart we have our male and female selves. May our hearts be ever open, may our lovers be as one, may our dualities not confound us anymore. Our moon reflects our sun, stargates we are one. So the idea that I have two halves in myself that are striving to try and find a harmony and a balance, but oftentimes they're just not really communicating together because the mind isn't listening to the feelings, or the mind is too busy analysing, and all of these kind of things anyway, analogies to analogies to analogies. In many ways, I think I won't put this video up because it's not plain simple and whatever. And on the other hand, I think I'll just put this video up anyway because I'm at least attempting to share knowledge, and a strange, unique kind of knowledge that's saying that knowledge itself is what gets in the way of being. But that's just to say that half gets in the way of the other half. It doesn't mean that knowledge is wrong. But I think there is something going on in the collective where the two halves are beginning to be fully connected instead of separated, kind of thing. And that's a rebalancing going on. And it's a lunar eclipse later today here in England. In a few hours' time it's a lunar eclipse, and there'll be a ring of fire around the moon for whatever few moments. But it may well represent this South Node in Libra, which is the analysing of the past in order to leave the past in the past and just bring forward what's of value, the Venus element of what's of value. And in the healing of what's not of value anymore, which is to say, like, is it worth continuing the same old arguments when nobody's actually right? Nobody's actually right in the sense of bodies believing that we're separate. The belief in separation is not right, so to speak. Or it's not holistic. Or it was the way it was, and that's changing now. The comprehension that we're all one. A global view instead of a bipolar view. I find it fascinating the way I think so much and have so much memory stored in my mind, and so much time spent actually going through all that thought process and being aware of it, because it's constantly like an AI going through the database of my soul memory and current memories and comparing and seeing patterns in code almost by analogy. But memory holding on to all knowledge in past compared to what is the present. Present is the wrong word because it's got present. What is the moment as a 0 point? Actual stillness. The equivalent to what it would be if my body had died, and here I am looking back on my life from a soul point of view. But my body hasn't actually died, I'm just looking back on my life from a soul point of view while still in the body. And it's very confusing in a way, but it's also very relieving in other ways. So that's just a sharing about the uneasy feeling there is in many ways these days, and the realization that worry is something that the mind is always doing, and it's analyzing from past to future, and in its fear of repeating past mistakes, or fear that people we love will repeat their past mistakes. All the worries are like unresolved theories or unresolved questions. So these days I'm training my mind. Here's a way of saying it. I'm training my mind, or my mind is being trained by the oversoul archangel in me, or whatever you want to call it. But the mind is being trained to try and figure out how to allow the feelings to rise to a state of joy, and how the mind could help with that. So that's so that the mind, instead of worrying all the time, has a question set which says, how do I help my feelings to remember that I could be enjoying this moment rather than worrying? And from a state of joy, there are simpler perspectives to be able to see how to solve the thing which on the state of worry has no solution. So on the global oneness level, it's easy to see the solution to all the problems. Whereas down here on the separated ego level, it's kind of impossible to solve any of the problems on this level. So that's like the two dualities becoming whole and cooperating. And anyway, this is the experiment I have going on myself to see if my life actually does begin to sort itself out these days, rather than me trying to fix it and only digging deeper holes, which is really what happens in life to a large degree from my experience. Anyway, a bit chilly, and feel free to chat if you want to anybody who finds that they have something that to say about what I'm saying here, like if it actually speaks to you. Because in some ways it sounds like rambling too much thought, doesn't it? But there's the examples of the self-criticism anyway. Should I speak or should I not? Should I act or should I not? Should I act now or should I act later? The responsibility of speaking at all, and of being open to hear what someone else is actually saying. Bye for now.